Good evening. You're watching The Big Picture. I'm Ishan and the issue that we decided to talk about today is the new surveillance and intelligence law that has been passed in France in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo attack. But why talk about a law that France is implementing? Well, the ramifications of this are quite huge. The new law will allow authorities to spy on the digital and mobile phone communications of anyone linked to a terrorist inquiry without prior authorization from a judge. It forces internet service providers and phone companies to give up data on request. Intelligence services will have the right to place cameras and recording devices in private homes and install so-called key logger devices that record every keystroke on a targeted computer in real time. The authorities will be able to keep recordings for a month and metadata gathered from internet users over 5 years. Now, the larger worry is that to combat the scourge of terrorism, will more countries now follow suit, and are such extreme measures the only option in the present global scenario? To help us answer these questions, I am joined by Mahima Kaul, Head of Cyber Media Initiatives at the Observer Research Foundation. ND Pancholi, human rights activist and Supreme Court advocate, also joins us. Former IB Director, Mr. DC Pathak, we're joined by, as well as Sanjay Kapoor here. He's the editor of Hardnews. I'll start with you, Sanjay. I mean, just to put this legislation into context, is this Orwellian or is this a necessity of the times that we live in? And is this only confined to France, or does it have larger global ramifications?
I think France got really thrown off when Charlie Hebdo happened. Before Charlie Hebdo, they didn't have any kind of terror attack, and in fact, France's example was showcased as to how well they are able to do surveillance on all the groups which threaten their society. So after this incident happened that killed about 13 people, they began to devise ways in which they can, make things far more stricter and surveillance more sharper. And this is the outcome, which I think is reminding people of an Orwellian nightmare where even a thought crime could be a crime. So if you go back to what you were saying a short while back, but I may not act, but the act of a thought crime might compel you can say the French intelligence agency to nab me and put me through a ringer. So these are very, very worrying times. And what normally happens is that once one country has, have these kind of laws, there is a copycat, because every country these days is talking about a threat to their national security, and that has in a certain way provided an opportunity for technology which is peddled by so-called homeland security agencies. So what will happen in France will have a resonance in society like India, which has greater terror problem than probably France has had. And similarly in other societies also. So we need to worry. And after the exposure by Edward Snowden about the marriage which has normally taken place between web and internet companies and say CIA or NSA, there is a great case for resisting it whichever way one can.
But can one resist it? Mr. Pathak, you've been in the intelligence gathering, you've headed the Intelligence Bureau for India, and just how difficult is it? I mean, this is a completely changed communication scenario. You have people who are looking at websites, who are getting influence, who are trying to participate, and but they're lone wolf terrorists who, without any active support from any terror organization, just go out and do things. Charlie Hebdo is one example. So how difficult is it? I mean, is it a necessity of the time, such legislation?
You know, as a distant observer, because we are discussing things which happened in France, my take is that that considering that France is a robust democracy, firmly rooted in the concept of liberty, right? I would like to suggest that we need not question the necessity of what they are doing, although we should question the misuse of those steps today or later on. That should be the approach. And you see, no surveillance is complete or blind, because otherwise it's such a waste of energy even for an intelligence organization. It is always correlated to some basis of suspicion. And in this law, as far as I have been able to gather, whether it's a question of planting a bugging device or a clandestine photography, or even the key logger device of an individual who, for whom there is some basis of suspicion, not in every house. a targeted computer will be brought in. Now this is an extension of the good old foot surveillance of the old time. Now the medium is digital, and it so happens that the adversary is likely to have the first advantage. So against a few adversaries, and from the France's point of view, they are not dealing with a small bunch of, they are one of the major targets of Islamic radicals, and the incident that happened, I mean, those people said we are connected with ISIS and Al-Qaeda both. You know, for 3 days Paris was in the grip of terror.
Right.
So, I mean, these are not small things, and that country with this background. So, I said, yes, okay, I'll say yes. Perhaps they think it's necessary.
It's necessary and should not be misused.
We can discuss the minuses and pluses of it as we go along.
All right, but Mahima, I want to get you in. As far as the internet freedom is concerned, I mean, we've just recently had this entire conversation in India over here about net neutrality, about internet for everybody. And some would argue that Google already knows, is already profiling you. So what's the harm if the intelligence gathering agencies have to resort to such profiling? I mean, that's the need of our times.
Okay, so I'll sort of answer this question in two bunches. The first is, since we're talking about France, I'll invoke a great Frenchman called Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who talked about the social contract with the state. And the idea of the social contract is really that you elect a political community, and that community rules you. And so you get a constitution. In that constitution, as a citizen, I have rights, I have fundamental duties, I have... it's all laid out, the executive, how it's going to work. Then you have laws, then you have agencies that implement that laws, and so on and so forth, and that's how the country functions. Now, if you have the right to free expression, or you have the right to privacy, which we don't in India outright, but it's been determined by the court through other fundamental rights that we have, then when you implement an agency, and the agency starts doing things which is illegal, and it actually affects your fundamental rights as a citizen, it is wrong. Now, in this case, we're talking about laws. We're talking about laws that are being passed, and it is up to France to decide whether those laws are overreaching, because what happens here is the technology is moving at an unprecedented state, and we are able to communicate with each other more rapidly and in more ways than we ever could. And at the same time, the state also now has access to technology to keep track of our communications. If you look at the global trend, and I'm sure the fellow panelists will agree with this, the ability to capture metadata, the ability to do real-time interception, monitoring of our conversations, those are things the state has. Should they be able to get overreaching broad powers to actually listen into our conversations? Should it be through executive authority, or should they go through a judicial authority? What should the procedure be? What should the transparency be in this system? What should the oversight be? I think these are really important questions to have and address alongside with any national security concern that any country has, which are incredibly valid, and I do understand that that is the reason why these laws are enacted in the first place.
All right, Ms. Pancholi, I'll come across to you. As far as the human element of it is concerned, I mean, there is, as our other panelists were pointing out, France is under threat. Islamic terror, of course, is on the rise over there. But does this lead to the marginalization of a community? Does this lead to profiling of sorts that makes others stand up and say that we're not being counted as equal citizens? And I'm talking about France, but then this could be true for any other country that tries to implement such a law.
You see, first of all, I am very much distressed that this law has been passed by a country, France, which has been in the which has a historical reference. The movements, revolutionary movements, progressive movements have emanated. French Revolution, the liberty, equality, fraternity, all these principles, and this law passed by France, I could never imagine. I do not agree with the view that we should talk only misuse and not the necessity. There is no necessity, in my view, there is no necessity. Such kind of laws always liable to be misused. I have lot of experience. We have in our country, we have TADA, POTA, all these, and we know in America, the Patriotism Act, the way they have implemented the Guantanamo jails, etc. So these so much misuse is there. In fact, this France has become a kind of, if I may say, use the word, a puppet of the American larger designed the war of terror. It is part of that war of terror which is spreading its tentacles all over the world. And we have a juvenile act. We are seeing the way they are introducing the age, they are reducing the age limit of the juveniles. So that's it, because they will use it on young people, minor peoples of the minorities. That is what I apprehend. So it is a part of the global design, and this war, now it is a war of terror, but it started in 1920 when communism was there, and this pan-Islamism was considered. If you read the debates of the Communist International of 1920, there was a combination of this.
All right.
So now it has turned into the war against communism has turned into war against terror. In fact, this the marginalization of the minority, Muslim minority.
All right, so Mr. Pathak, I'll get you in on that, because the fact is that is this necessary? I'll come back to it again. Mr. Pancholi thinks it certainly is not necessary. The Patriot Act is one example of where, I mean, there were pretty draconian measures that were taken over there, and the experience, I mean, Guantanamo Bay was one, the NSA spying on the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. I mean, at the end of the day, there is no limit to misuse. So to have such provisions in the first place, to have a government saying that, no, it's okay for me to do this as long as I don't misuse it. Is that okay?
You know, I understand the kind of the sources of criticism whenever such a thing happens. There are 3 or 4 areas of concern. One is just now mentioned about the action being taken against suspicion, a person on whom some material is there. I think it is good to clarify that intelligence collects information. It does not take legal action. Legal action is the police. Intelligence is. Now, therefore, information, very often information will never tell a lie. The action may be a misuse thing. I mean, the kind of action, all investigation agencies. So that is one area of concern, and I think a way can be found to see that legally it is not misused, because it has to be evidence-based. But the concern comes from, the advocacy of freedom and privacy. My view is that I think in a democracy, the citizens must understand somewhere that the national security initiatives, they should be able to abide by them and not say that I'm a free man and the state cannot do anything to whatever it wants to do. They're not pursuing you, they're pursuing a national security objective. So, I mean, making too much of a complaint of this doesn't...
I mean, historically, there have been so many examples from Watergate to any other examples of where such apparatuses have been used to, I mean, subvert and target common citizens for that matter. So,
now take the case of this, France. I mean, what has happened? The ruling socialists and the opposition, the conservatives, both have predominantly backed this up. I mean, is this not a guarantee that no government of the day would sort of be politically...
But when you've been through a traumatic experience, I mean, if you try to bring in this legislation in India for that matter, when perhaps 26/11 happened, I mean, there would be overwhelming support for it. But at the end of the day, just in terms of lawmakers, isn't it imperative that you keep in mind a larger goal, a larger idea, and not try to... is this a quick fix solution to a larger problem?
You see, my take on this is not because I headed the IB. I think our system is far more sound and credible, because we believe that our intelligence agencies do whatever they do on the authority of the political executive of the day. Right. It is the political executive who runs the sovereignty of the country. And how can anybody claim to be more loyal than the political executive which is running the country and running the sovereignty? So on that, I mean, we are not gone into this pattern of too much of legislation about. The government is satisfied, agencies don't go public. Government is satisfied that the agencies are accountable to them, and unless there is a rogue element ruling the country or a rogue element heading the intelligence agency, I think the system has worked very well down the decades.
All right, people when pushed into corner can do strange things, but Mahima, if we talk about free speech versus, free speech and the right to privacy versus national security, how do laws really keep up with these changing communication needs of us?
Well, that's the first problem, that the laws really can't keep up with
And
the
we had that
technology
Section
the way-
66A entire...
And let me tell you an
debate.
interesting thing about Section 66A, which a lot of your audience might already know. The IT Act was passed after the Mumbai attacks. And that's the reason why there was no debate in Parliament. It was just passed. And later when people actually looked at the law and they looked at the abuse of Section 66A, a Supreme Court judgment has actually struck it down as being unconstitutional. So like you said, when a country has gone through a traumatic experience, it's maybe not the best time to pass laws like these, which can have very long-term effects. We're talking about surveillance. I want to feel safe. So I do understand some amount of surveillance is necessary to keep a functioning and a healthy society. So I don't think anyone is really countering the need or the fact that there is surveillance. I think the question really comes from perhaps civil society who haven't had to sit in the chair and actually conduct these kind of national security exercises. Is it following a certain level of transparency and accountability? And if you look at surveillance exercises globally, I think the trend is sort of turning towards, let's not have the political executive sanction it, but maybe we should have a judicial order. It should go to a court. A judge should say that yes, you can go ahead and conduct this kind of surveillance. You've seen that a little bit in the Supreme Court judgment as well when it comes to the intermediaries. Then instead of a political executive sort of giving the order that take down content, now it has to be a judicial order. So maybe we can add some structure into it. You should not have blanket mass surveillance because you might be after one person, but the network effect of following that person could mean that you get information about XYZ people which is politically damning, even though it does not have any bearing on a terrorist investigation. What do they do with that? And then to ensure that there is no legal that there is no misuse of this information. These are the kinds of concerns that people are looking at. Nobody is arguing over here that terrorists should not be investigated. It's really who gets caught up in this huge net that you're throwing, in these huge surveillance infrastructure that you're putting out there, which costs a lot of money, which we don't talk about. How much did it cost us? How much did it cost to train people? How many people are you actually catching? We need to have these conversations.
All right. Sanjay, as far as taking off from what Mahima said about the need for this, is it, in this scenario that we live in, has a right to privacy or the right to, explore? If tomorrow I want to read up on ISIS, does that make me a target for surveillance? Where does one draw the line?
The fear time and again is misuse. So may start off with chasing terrorists, but invariably what happens, it is targeted, it is used against people who are political opponents, people who are not, you can say, on the right side of people who are in power. I remember a fellow journalist who was, at the time of the earlier regime, he was caught only because he downloaded a map from the internet, and it was seen to be a map which was, considered to be hostile by the state. And he went through hell. It took a lot of effort on the part of the media community and all kinds of pressure, and he managed to get out. So, and now you must understand what I'm talking about was 10, 15 years ago. Now the technology become far more invasive, far more precise. They know exactly what kind of websites you are tracking, what is your mood, what do you eat, what is your relationship with your wife. They track your email, they track your WhatsApp. So there is a great amount of convergence of data which happens. So, we are always under a watch. And so how do you ensure that a certain amount of privacy is protected? How does your liberty is protected? Those kind of issues are not being taken up, and especially when an incident like Charlie Hebdo happens, then the society is very scared. So when a survey is conducted in France, 63% say we are willing to limit our civil liberties. And okay, as of now they want to. But I'm sure 6 months...
the law was drafted just 3 days after Charlie
So, this is what happens. This is exactly what happened in India. Immediately after 26/11, we decided to have an NIA, National Investigating Agency, when it was not required. What it probably meant was to have the CBI being empowered more, and surely a lot of work would have happened, but they decided to rush through it. So these are the moments when the security apparatus of the state says, politicians, you're doing something not right. let us become more powerful and we'll make you more secure. So I'm sure Mr. Pathak would not agree with me on this, but that is the moment when technology enlarges influence, the security personnel enlarges the influence, and people who pride in making India or any society a hard state, they are the ones who actually go forward on that.
I've obviously missed feeling that powerful in my time, but as I said, there has to be some basis for why a state is trying to reach up to an individual. And even these lock boxes, for instance, which I read, that provision of that. I mean, there is a certain amount of analytical read of what that machine will do. The kind of websites visited, of course, it can be misused. I totally agree that if I've clicked on ISIS, police should not come knocking at my door. I mean, that kind of nonsense has to be prevented. Or the kind of
there's no protection for that.
No, therefore we should demand
judicial protection for
the people should demand refinement of the basis of suspicion. That should be the point of critique.
No, but then if suspicion is being determined through profiling, then it could lead to, I mean, it's a chicken and egg situation.
Profiling is
like, for example, of this Priya Pillai woman who was supposed to go there. The charge was that she will go to UK and she's going to speak badly about the government. So it may or may not be true, but that assumption is built into it. Similar assumption can be also brought in when you are found tracking all kinds of idiotic websites.
Right.
Because that algorithm that has been built in, that is supposed to anticipate what you will do 6 months down the line.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not that you are committing a crime now, but you are building up to doing a thought crime. That 6 months down the line, I'm going to abuse the leader more, or maybe jump on his car if he is driving next to me. But he may not kill. You know, he may.
No,
not
or
get
even
service.
if you say in a private chat or in a conversation to a friend that I do not like this, I want to take stern action about it. I'm not using any words, but that could lead to thought policing. I want to get to Mr. Pancholi also because he's been waiting very patiently. And Mr. Pancholi, often history is one resorts to when trying to understand our evolution of our laws and the misuse of such laws. So such laws, are they more liable to misuse, or do you think from here on this is what the world needs, not just necessarily in this format, in this direction, but something on these lines that people need to be tracked, because it's not an individual, it's not an organization, it's not a physical entity that you're targeting. You're targeting, or not targeting, but you're tackling, and you're tackling individuals at the end of the day.
See, the professed purpose which they are saying that they want for national security, for economic security, but this is not the real purpose. Real purpose is to suppress the movements. Movements are going on within the countries. The dissent is going on for the suppressive laws and the international corporate, the kind of corporate imperialism which is spreading. So these movements are going on, and the purpose is to suppress all these movements. And you see, and there is a design. There is a design. The moment this law was passed in France, simultaneously I heard the Charlie Hebdo has been given award for freedom of expression. I think today in America or someone. So this simultaneously, these things are going on. The target is a particular community. That is what I feel.
All right, so you're saying that this is an attempt to target a particular community, and I mean, this is a problem that the globe is facing, and everybody seems to be taking sides. The world is getting divided. Mr. Pathak, very quickly, we've just about 1 minute. Your final comments as far as the necessity.
I think the way
of
out of putting all these kind of internal suspicions to rest is to move in the direction of creating an awareness that every citizen should feel that he is contributing to national security. Then he won't mind if with others something, some little watch has covered him also, you know. I think we have to move in that direction. Otherwise, we are creating a conflict between the citizens and the state in a healthy democracy like ours. And I can tell you, as far as Indian intelligence is concerned, we never put anybody under surveillance unless we have an authentication from somebody outside the agency, somebody above that. And it's worked well.
All right, Mr. Pancholi, you want to add very quickly, we've almost run out of time.
And this national security, you see that the judgment which was passed in that Pillai case when she was going out, and the charge of the defense of the government was that she was doing anti-national activity. Now the judge, while giving the judgment, he tried to find out what is the meaning of anti-national. He checked through a lot of dictionaries, and he writes in the judgment, I could not find the word anti-national. Then he said, let me find out what is national. Then in national there are various trends. So he came to find out that whatever comes in the mind of a intelligence or the person, he says that this is anti-national. So that is why this the person they think that whatever they think, that is anti-national.
Okay, so maybe it is thought policing at the end of the day. To a certain extent, Mr. Pathak, you'll have to agree to that, isn't it? I mean, and perhaps it's a necessity at times.
My call would be to say that collective good must prevail over the individual. I mean, in whatever way we can move in the direction, we would be strengthening the national.
Anything to find?
Well, I think that in India we do look at the community before the individual, which is not how they do it in the US. So we do have a different mindset. I know that when we were talking about the central monitoring system, one of the explanations given was that in this way the government actually bypasses the internet service provider, and so there is more privacy to the individual being under surveillance, because one more person will not know about it.
Right.
But having said that, I just want to add a last thing about people. You said, people should really sort of take part in national security efforts and be open to surveillance, and in that extension they should be law-abiding citizens, really. So the logic is that if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about, which is fair. But I do think that if you look at the protest in the public sphere over various arrests over 66A, I think there's a very sensible kind of reaction that came out from people. When it was politically motivated or it was absolutely wrong, you saw some kind of protest coming out. When there were cartoons which are really not sedition, you saw protest. But when there was an ISIS sympathizer who was arrested, you didn't see anybody sympathizing and in protest of him. So I think people want to be secure. It's really about...
All right, so it's often left to people to decide, but at the end of the day, the laws that govern us do really make a difference, and we'll have to wrap it up over here. Thank you very much for my panelists for coming in, Mr. Pancholi. Thank you very much to you too. On that note, we'll wrap up. What do you think about this law that France is passing? Is it overarching surveillance? Is it thought policing? Do let us know. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Big Picture.